Candidate Forum. This event is being recorded. I'm Becky Simon with the League of Women Voters of Naperville. League of Women Voters is a non-partisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates for public office. Rather, we believe that a well-informed voter is best able to make their own decision at the ballot box. League of Women Voters of Naperville is producing this candidate forum in partnership with our sister leagues, the League of Women Voters of the Aurora area and League of Women Voters of Downers Grove, Woodridge, Lisle. Now I would like to introduce tonight's moderator, Jan Dorner from the League of Women Voters of Elmhurst and on the board of League of Women Voters of Illinois. Jan?
Thank you, Becky. I would also like to add that I live in Congressional District 5. The League of Women Voters' purpose is to promote political responsibility through the informed and active participation of citizens in government. Providing this forum allows citizens to become better informed about the issues facing their community and to become better acquainted with the candidates running for office. We're happy to provide this service for the community. Questions have been collected from our members and the community before this forum and were screened for duplication, clarity, and appropriateness to the office being discussed. This forum is between the two candidates seeking to represent the 11th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. The candidates have agreed to abide by the rules set forth prior to this forum. They will each present a 2-minute introductory statement. The order to start is alphabetical. Then questions will be asked and each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond in alternating order. Closing statements will be 2 minutes as well. There will be timer slides on the screen and I will ask you to adhere to these time limits. When you see the stop sign, you may finish your sentence, but we ask that you conclude at that point. Tonight's candidate are Bill Foster and Rick Laib. So let's start with candidate Foster with your introductory statement.
Thank you. And am I properly audible and visible?
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks Jan and Becky and to the League of Women Voters. For over 100 years, you've been essential to providing a platform for thoughtful and nonpartisan debate, which I'm afraid is essential now more than ever. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill Foster. I'm a scientist, a businessman, and the son of a civil rights lawyer. And it's my honor to represent Illinois' 11th District in the Congress of the United States. As a scientist, I worked for 23 years at Fermi National Accelerator Lab, Fermi Lab, performing experiments and solving some of the toughest challenges in science, and leading teams that help build the giant particle accelerators at Fermi Lab. As a businessman, when I was 19, my younger brother and I started a company in our basement with $500 from our parents, and that company now manufactures over half of the theater lighting equipment in the US and provides more than 1,000 jobs. Good high-tech manufacturing jobs with good pay and good benefits. And we have kept all those manufacturing jobs in the Midwest, which is something I'm very proud of because I understand the importance of providing good paying jobs to the middle class. As a member of Congress, I serve on the House Select Committee on the coronavirus response as we respond to this devastating pandemic. On that committee, I help ensure that the voice of science and reason is being heard in Washington and that the trillions of dollars that Congress has allocated to help protect American workers and their families during this pandemic are actually going where they were intended. As the only PhD scientist in Congress, I also serve on the Science Committee, grappling with scientific and technological issues such as climate change and cybersecurity, in an increasingly partisan atmosphere where scientific facts and logic are unfortunately often ignored. As a member of the Financial Services Committee, I was deeply involved in both the emergency intervention to rescue our economy 10 years ago, to rescue the automobile industry, the housing industry. So I'm asking for your vote to return to Congress, and it appears I've run out of time.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, would you like to give your introductory statement?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Laib. I'm from Joliet. I am a 24-year veteran of the Will County Sheriff's Office. I started my career working in the ADF, the Adult Detention Facility. I spent the majority of my career in patrol, and now I oversee the security of the Will County Courthouse. I work as a sergeant there. While I've been there, I've been blessed to serve in a number of different capacities, to include the Honor Guard that I helped launch within our department, and spent 14 and a half years on our SWAT team. I love being a police officer. I just love it. And it's been an honor to serve in that capacity. I've just been very blessed in my career. I'm running as a pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-free market candidate because I think those objectives best adhere to these goals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'd like to see those take a more dominant role in our government, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you. Let's start with our questions. Candidate Laib, what level of engagement with our allies and the global community should the U.S. maintain with respect to nuclear arms treaties, defense treaties, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and relief efforts around the world?
There's quite a list there. We need to protect United States interests, not just the physical property, but we have to protect the intellectual property as well. We need to protect our citizens. We need to protect our businesses. The opportunities that people have to thrive in the United States have to be protected. That has to be a priority. To that degree, if we are working on teaching our citizens, teaching our students to be good civilians and good citizens, that will have a natural outworking in a positive way in how we interact with these other bordering countries, to include the agencies that represent them. So we have to make United States interests, both intellectual and physical interests, a priority and protecting those first. And then we can start working on how we interact with these other countries.
Thank you. Candidate Foster?
Well, I think it's one of the lessons that we've learned from COVID and other places is that we can't just focus on ourselves as a country. We have to collaborate with other countries. Just look at the difference in the response of the Obama administration to the Ebola pandemic, which was largely contained to Africa because we offered immediate and useful assistance based on the best available science to that area. As a result, we did not have to deal with it on shore. And the contrast with the response of the Trump administration is largely focused on the issue, the COVID issue, as a public relations problem instead of a public health problem, trying to blame China instead of actually trying to understand what assistance we can get. For example, when the US testing from the CDC failed, we should have immediately gone to the World Health Organization, which did have testing that works. But because of the culture of the Trump administration, they were not willing to do that. You saw that also in the Iran nuclear deal. Trump's tearing up of the Iran nuclear deal was one of the tragic mistakes of the last 3 years. It was a triumph of international diplomacy, and in diplomatic compromises, you don't get everything you want, but it was a huge step forward that would have permanently guaranteed that Iran never have a nuclear weapon and provide what's necessary in terms of international inspection to make sure that didn't happen. I was very involved actually in the debate over the Iran nuclear deal. I had at the time dozens of hours of classified briefings on the details of that. And so I was able to, at that time, to being the only PhD scientist in Congress, explain to my fellow members of Congress why it netted out as a positive for the security of the world.
Thank you. Bill Foster, what are your priorities to address climate change? Do you endorse rejoining the Paris Climate Accord?
Yes, I do. I think it was another one of the tragic mistakes of President Trump's administration. If you look at the problem in the long term, the crucial thing that we have to do is put money and effort into developing the technologies to decarbonize our economy at a price that is low enough that the rest of the world will actually follow us. There's enough money to decarbonize our economy now, for ourselves. But if we do that using today's technologies that are frankly too expensive to be afforded by countries, like India, China, Africa, South America, then they will not follow us in this, because after all, we're only 4% of the population of the world. And so what the crucial thing that has to be done is, frankly, what happened with electric cars. And so two things happen there. The first thing is that for decades, we put federal research into making batteries less expensive. The second thing we did was, even in the depths of the financial crisis, about 10 years ago, we looked at analyses that indicated that electric cars by themselves would be cheaper than internal combustion cars for total cost of ownership, and that because of the progress of batteries at places like Argonne National Lab, which developed the cathodes that are used in the lithium-ion batteries used in cars today. Because of that kind of R&D, the price point was such that an electric car could compete. So we put $500 million into this startup called Tesla to set up its first factory. The market capitalization of Tesla, last time I looked, is somewhere around 1,000 times higher, about $500 billion, which tells you the return on investment of federal research and targeted investments. And because of that, electric cars' total cost of ownership within a couple of years will be less than gasoline cars, and that will end the debate, and the rest of the world will follow us.
Thank you. Rick Laib, what is your priority to address climate change, and do you endorse rejoining the Paris Climate Accord?
I do not endorse rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. I think the tragic mistake would be to rejoin that. My priority then would be to mobilize private industry. Mr. Foster and I are in agreement that there are technologies that are developed, have been developed, and can continue to be developed to help the environment, to help care for the earth. But we disagree on the way to go about that. I don't think that the government produces that kind of technology. The government can fund it, and that's really just Americans funding it. That's just taxpayers funding it. It would seem to me that the best entity suited for develop these type of technologies that have worked in the past, that will work if we allow them, are private industry. They know the science, they have the setup, they're aware of what can be done, they have a path. What's incumbent on Congress then is to remove regulation and lower taxes. If they could do that, it's no different than any other kind of business. You reduce the regulations, you lower the taxes, business can move faster, easier, more efficiently, and they're in a better position to develop this kind of technology. Now, specific to the environment, they're in a better position to develop technologies that would better care for the earth. So I believe that Congress can do something about caring for the earth, specifically getting rid of regulations, reducing them wherever they can, and lowering taxes.
Thank you, Candidate Laib. We are learning the role that racism has played and how it continues to be perpetuated in our systems at all levels. What are you doing to educate yourself about systemic racism, and what can be done to eliminate it from our culture and legal system?
When we talk about systemic racism, I think that people have ideas on how to reduce it. That's what they want, and they talk about different ways of pulling back on this type of music, or this type of language is no longer used. But that, I think, will reduce racism. But we want to eliminate, and that was the question: how do we eliminate it? We're really not seeing any kind of racism when in a truly loving platform. And so the long-term goal, I think, would just be to stop the attack on anyone wanting to practice religion. So we want to protect and defend religious liberty. That's going to be the outworking of removing any of these kinds of sins and hurts from our planet. So we want to just say we're going to get rid of the sin without doing anything about it. That just seems to be a misstep. We want to get it at its root. So then what we want to do is to aggressively fight for religious liberty and defend religious liberty.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, the same question.
Yes, systemic racism is a problem in our country. It's been a problem since I was a child and long before. And I'm proud that the next generation has taken up this battle with peaceful protest, which is the best tool to take it on. I'm proud also that Democrats in the House have taken action by passing the Justice and Policing Act. This does things including banning chokeholds, funding body cameras so that people have a guarantee that when you come in contact with the police, that the thing will be on camera, and that both the citizen and the officer of the law will know that the eyes of history are on them. It requires transparency of data on things like traffic stops. It establishes a registry of police misconduct so that bad actors can't simply move from one police force to another, as they unfortunately often have. It limits transfer of large-scale military equipment to local law enforcement. And for the first time, it makes lynching a federal crime. I am sad that the Senate has done nothing on this, so this unfortunately will remain on our list, awaiting a better president and new leadership in the Senate.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in millions of jobs lost and business failures. Has this changed your thinking on the viability of employment-based health insurance? Do you favor moving forward with some form of universality available health insurance?
No, it hasn't changed my thinking. I think I've been quite well aligned with President Biden Vice President Biden for most of my career. That I think that the best path towards universal health coverage, which I think essentially all Democrats believe in, the best path I believe, the most achievable one, is an incremental one. So, for example, I believe we should continue the expansion of Medicaid to turn off means testing of Medicaid instead of just raise the thresholds as Obamacare did, and also increase the quality of Medicaid coverage. So that is, for good or ill, the real safety net in our country. When you present yourself to our system with no money and no insurance, you get Medicaid, and this is and it should be better than it currently is. Similarly, another incremental reform that I would support is to reduce the age of eligibility for Medicare. And so this is something that can provide medical coverage to millions of Americans as they approach the age of eligibility for Medicare, where much of the severe medical problems actually start. So a step-by-step approach of this, like this, I think is the most politically realistic one, and one that I think is pretty much aligned with what I hope Vice President Biden will prioritize when he takes office in a few months.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, what is your feeling on the viability of employment-based health insurance, and do you favor moving forward towards some form of universally available health insurance?
Well, this is another area where Mr. Foster and I are in agreement. The COVID-19 has not changed our views. We still hold the same views. And my view would be, now more than ever, we need to get government out of the healthcare business. Individuals are well prepared to craft and help develop their own healthcare benefit needs and to address those needs. They are the best person for it. They know what they need more so than anyone else. What the congressman is suggesting is, although it would be an incremental increase, it would still be an increase. And now more than ever, when people are not working, they're out of jobs, that price tags comes from somewhere, and it's going to come from taxpayers. And now more than ever, they don't have it. And so it is incumbent on Congress. They can do something. They can do something aggressive. The best move then would be the one of getting out of the business altogether. Employers can work with their own employees to develop the best programs, and anyone else who's working, not working, can work with healthcare providers to develop their own programs and let the private enterprise take over. Let the free market develop and meet the needs of the individuals. That really is the most caring and most loving thing that they can do, is find out what the needs, where are the people, meet them where they're at, rather than putting more steps in by way of the government. The government means well here, but they're not in the best position to provide that kind of media care.
Thank you, Candidate Laib. Do you support universal background checks to reduce gun violence? Do you support the restoration of the assault weapons ban?
I do not, because I am hesitant, and I will always the flags go up, any type of move that is just kind of a feel-good move. These type of steps are designed to help reduce and maybe eliminate gun violence. but they don't. They just put sanctions on law-abiding gun owners. And the people that we want to help protect us, they're the ones that are abiding. So people that are prone to break the law, they're going to do so without any kind of background checks. So I am against any kind of feel-good move, any kind of feel-good step that really doesn't have any kind of impact or significant impact on something as serious as one of our constitutional rights. It would be a direct attack on our constitutional rights. And so no, I would not support those.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, the same question.
Yes, I support universal background checks, closing the internet loophole, internet sales loophole, and restoring the assault weapons ban. It's not true that these laws do no good. If you look at what Australia did when they saw, they saw mass instances of mass violence with assault weapons. They said, this is crazy. These are military weapons that have no place. They had serious restrictions on them. They had gun buybacks, and they pretty much pulled the assault weapons out of the population, and they've seen a significant reduction in the rate of mass murders with guns in Australia. And I don't think the Australians are that different culturally than the United States.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, during the current COVID-19 crisis, the federal government has increased deficit spending while millions of job losses cut into tax revenues. How should the Congress weigh the current critical needs against the spiraling national debt?
Well, I think that at this point, we need to continue running deficits. One of the fundamental lessons of macroeconomics is that during times of economic crisis, the government runs a deficit to keep the rest of the economy afloat. And then the other, chapter 2 in Macroeconomics 102 is that when the economy is working well again, then you actually tax those that can afford it in order to repay the debt that you built up the emergency time. Most of Congress seems to have slept through that second lecture about that, and we in fact did the exact opposite with the Trump tax cuts. Trump inherited the best economy of any president in my lifetime, and the very first thing that they did was to just have a massive tax cut for the wealthy that contributed nothing at all to the rate of job creation. It's remarkable that despite all of the noise, if you actually look at the rate of job creation in the 3 years of the Trump administration prior to COVID, it was less than the rate of job creation in the last 3 years in the Obama-Biden administration. And so there's a lot of sort of rewriting of economic history here. We were in fact in a manufacturing recession before COVID hit. And so we have to be very careful about claiming that any of the policies that the Trump administration implemented that massively increased our deficits were actually responsible for anything but a continuation of the positive trends he inherited from the Obama-Biden administration.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, how should the Congress weigh the current critical needs against the spiraling national debt?
Well, I do believe that the government is in a great position to help people in time of need. We're dealing with catastrophic conditions. That is a perfect place for the government to step in. So the idea of bailouts, the funding, these type of helps given to the people in sort of a humanitarian effort, I think that's a great idea, and that's one of the services that government provides. But that's in a catastrophic time. I think what we want to get out of this, we need to develop a plan, and that plan would not be to tax people that are doing well. That doesn't make any sense to me, to punish people who are doing well, who come out of any kind of, whatever it's a recession or any kind of tough time financially, to say, okay, they're doing well, they have applied themselves, they've moved forward. I don't see why that we would raise the taxes. We can get things back on track the same way that you would get any business to help them to thrive, and that is to reduce regulations and to lower taxes. That's really what's going to develop the economy and to help people thrive and to get them moving, not to punish them. We're in disagreement about saying that the jobs are low. I don't know why I would say that the joblessness is high. That's not true. But even if it were, if we were saying, okay, that's fine, I still don't see why we would punish people for doing well. So my response then is yes, in times of catastrophe, times of disaster, the government, more so than anybody else, is in a good position to provide financial aid. It should be limited in scope. It should be done in a humanitarian effort to get people back on track. It should be limited. And then Congress should get to work in reducing regulations and lowering taxes and help people thrive financially.
Thank you, Candidate Laib. How to improve our election process has become a hot topic. What are your thoughts on campaign finance reform, shortening the campaign season, abolishing the Electoral College, and using available technology to make voting easier?
So you've listed a couple of things. Largely, I think that I don't see any need to limit campaigns or campaign timeframes. What I would love to see are some type of restrictions put on voting. That is to say, right now it's just open season. Anybody who wants to vote can vote, whether they're registered or not. We have a process in place for registered voters. And there's very little that can be done to check this. Here, there's voter fraud that takes place every year. And alone, just in Illinois, with some 15, 18 convictions of voter fraud just a year ago or 2 years ago. So it does happen, it's rampant. So I would love to see some kind of ID check. IDs are used for everything else, just to pay some bills, an ID is used. So something that's so important as your vote, for many people, this is the only part that they will take in their say in who their nation's leaders are going to be. So it's so very important and should be protected. I would say we absolutely need the Electoral College. That is the best protector of everybody getting a say. If we take away the Electoral College, then it's just going to be large numbers. Candidates would do anything just to campaign in bigger states like Texas and California. People in smaller states or people in states with a lower population, they really would have no say. They would have zero say. People in small groups or some smaller demographics, they would have no say. So it's incumbent on us to protect the Electoral College. It is the best tool that we have, that everybody gets a fair leveling of the board, and that we must protect our elections.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, your thoughts on campaign finance reform, shortening the campaign season, and abolishing the Electoral College, and using available technology to make voting easier.
Well, yeah, in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, first off, the only thing fraudulent about, vote by mail are Trump's claims of widespread cheating. I'm very proud that the first bill that we passed in this session of Congress when Democrats took control was H.R. 1, which made massive and overdue improvements to our voting system. Improved access by eliminating deliberately cumbersome registration systems that are put in place. It limited voting hours deliberately put in to restrict certain people from voting. Automatic voter, so-called motor voter number. So when you get an ID card, like a driver's license, you should be automatically registered to vote across the country. And a large number of things there. Just expanding early voting and absentee voting is very good for voter participation in every state that's done it. They've had negligible rates of voter fraud. I think Oregon, which has had it for many years, has less than 1,000th of 1% of voter fraud. And so I think that's something that's overdue. I'm not a fan of voting on the internet for reasons that I can't explain in 2 minutes, but as a scientist and a computer programmer and integrated circuit designer, there are real risks there, and I don't support that. H.R. 1 does things like getting rid of partisan gerrymandering, which I think is long overdue and crucial, replacing them with non-partisan redistricting commissions. Ensuring basic cybersecurity by providing assistance to local governments so that they don't get hacked by foreign actors or other people that are interested in interfering with our government, as well as just ending the dominance of big money in our politics with things like matching for small dollar donations. So there's a long list of things in H.R. 1 I'm very proud of that piece of legislation and urge
Thank you.
everyone watching this to go and
Thank
Google up HR1 and read it through.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, what piece of the immigration system do you believe needs to be addressed most urgently? If not covered in your answer, please speak to border security, DACA, and sanctuary cities. Again, in 2
One of my
minutes.
proudest votes in Congress was my vote in favor of the DREAM Act. 10 years ago, and one of my proudest votes of this current session of Congress is my vote 10 years later to pass it in the House. One of the tragedies of history was that we were not allowed to vote on the comprehensive immigration reform bill that was passed in the Senate in 2013. That was a bipartisan compromise that, when I talked to my Republican colleagues, is basically a deal that's available today. The deal that it made was, yes, there would be a one-time amnesty for the roughly 12 million people who are here without documentation, but that would be it. We would then have the rule of law. We would have strong workplace enforcement where there would be significant penalties. We'd have, basically E-Verify enforced with strict penalties for anyone who hired someone who was not legal to be working here. That's the way most countries like Canada, handle this problem. They don't have the same problem with the border. Interestingly, the 2013 Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, actually had a significant amount of money for border security and, in fact, the border wall. You may remember Luis Gutierrez, my former colleague from downtown Chicago, saying that he would personally build the wall brick by brick if this were to pass, to have the fundamental bargain that I just described. And interestingly, if you looked at the details of that, when you got the path to citizenship, which was a tough but fair path to citizenship, there was a $1,000 fee associated with that for every currently undocumented person who wanted to become a citizenship. You multiply that times 12 million people, that's $12 billion, which was roughly the amount of money that was allocated to building the wall. So that had that been allowed to be voted on in a very real way, the Mexicans would have paid for the wall.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, your feeling on immigration system, do you believe needs to be addressed most urgently? If not covered in your answer, please speak to border security, DACA, and sanctuary cities.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I believe that one of the first questions that was asked, it's incumbent on us to protect the United States physically. We want to protect ourselves intellectually, but I think that there's also a substantial value and merit in protecting our culture as well, our sense of patriotism. When we're talking about immigration, and the aspect that can give it the greatest amount of attention, I would say, is enforcement. We need to support ICE, support the enforcement of immigration laws, support the immigration judges so that they can have rulings that can move very quickly through some of the cases. There's so much of the immigration cases that are being heard that are being slowed down by steps that can be smoothed out very easily if we give them summary judgment, the judge's power of summary judgment. But we want to enforce the immigration laws. Sanctuary cities are not helping us. And so we want to get rid of sanctuary cities, and we certainly don't want to reward cities that are forming any kind of sanctuary cities. So we really want to work on our enforcement. We want to eliminate sanctuary cities. And then we just want to work the best that we can that people who want to legally immigrate, that they are assuming some type of American patriotism. They're understanding the glory of what makes the United States so great, and they can embrace that as well. So American patriotism has to be emphasized as well.
Candidate Laib, in many parts of the country, there's still limited access to crucial utilities like clean water, electricity, telephone service, and broadband internet connectivity. Is this a federal issue or strictly a state issue? And what can be done to make access universally available?
I understand that there is a role for the federal government to play here. The federal government is very good at connecting in the different states. And so to that end, there is a role for the federal government to play. However, that would be limited. They should not have no need to assume that. The federal government should come in a supportive capacity, allow the states to work through those issues the best that they can. It should be our job in the federal position to be removing ourselves best we can. And just as I said earlier, we want to get the government out of some of these issues to let the private citizen develop their own path for success. We want to do the same for the states. We want to empower and embolden the states to develop their solutions as well. However, the states cannot be accountable for other states. And so that's where the federal government would come in to help in a supportive capacity to work on these type of utilities, to address these kinds of gapes that are current.
Thank you. Candidate Foster? Same question.
I take it by supportive manner, that means money at some point, which means you have to specify who you're going to tax to do this. You know, I do believe in a federal role in infrastructure, and I think it should be understood why it's necessary that there's a federal role. It's for the same reason that there had to be a federal role to get rural areas electrified, because providing internet service or electricity for that matter to rural areas is not a profitable opportunity. Left to itself, the free market will abandon those people as well as many other people in our society for different reasons. And when you see that sort of failure of the free market, like the failure to provide internet to rural areas, I believe there is a federal role there. When you talk about the interstate aspect of it, one of, I think, the most significant problems that Illinois has is that because of the structure of the United States Senate, where it's dominated by these low population rural states, Illinois loses between 20 and $40 billion every year because we pay a lot more in federal taxes than we get back in federal spending. And so every citizen of Illinois writes a check of, you know, roughly $3,000 every year to the citizens of, you know, Florida or New Mexico or Wyoming or you name it. And this has been documented to be going on for the last 40 years. And if instead of writing this giant check to, you know, basically the Sun Belt every year, if we had simply put that in a rainy day fund, the rainy day fund, the balance in that rainy day fund today would be about $1.5 trillion, in which case Illinois would not have a reputation for being a fiscally profligate state, but would properly be a state which has right-sized its government and simply not have been fleeced by the low population states due to distorted spending formulas from the Senate.
Thank you, Bill Foster. Women's health care has become a political football due to wide differences on contraceptives and the right of choice. Should these be covered by private insurance and government-based insurance without restriction? Should state and local governments be able to restrict access to these health services if they are protected by federal law and Supreme Court decisions?
And that's to me?
That's to you.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, I believe that Roe versus Wade is a matter of settled law and should remain that way. I also believe that the federal government should provide all constitutionally allowed health coverage to women, and so that pretty much implies the answer to your questions.
Thank you. Rick Laib, your answer?
So I am in a disagreement. No, we're talking about healthcare. We're largely talking about abortion. And no, I'm not in favor of destroying innocent human beings. I don't think that anyone who understands the science would disagree that we're talking about a life and we're innocently taking that life. I don't know why we're supporting that and we're giving it too much of a pass. To that end, we know that it's legal and we know that it's allowable. It's maybe criminally acceptable, it's legally acceptable, but it's not a morally acceptable one. I certainly don't know why we're paying for it. So I would default to my original answer earlier about getting government out of healthcare. And if people are going to take some type of action medically, they can do so on their own and they can work with their providers for the best possible path. I do not see why Americans are paying for the destruction of other Americans.
Thank you. Rick Laib, do you support redistricting reforms and fair maps that would end gerrymandering and make the process more independent, inclusive, transparent, and which would ensure that communities are fully and fairly represented in Congress? How should the maps be drawn?
Absolutely. Yes, I am in favor of that, but I don't have a particular view on how they should be drawn. I am against gerrymandering. I see how it's hurt people as far as representation is concerned. So we want to do the best we can to eliminate that, but I don't have a particular view on the best way to draw those maps.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, your answer to redistricting.
Yes, I've been a big fan of ending gerrymandering from the moment I entered politics a decade ago. I've signed every one of the petitions and so on, and it's a source of frustration that Illinois hasn't taken the lead in this. States that have established independent redistricting commissions, nonpartisan redistricting commissions, have had very good luck in having the commissions generate maps that are widely regarded as fair. This was a big worry by many people because, you know, in the end, people kind of know on these committees who the Democrats and Republicans are. But one of the encouraging things about the results that we've seen is that when people take an oath to act in a fair and nonpartisan manner, they do. In the same way that when you're a juror, you take an oath as a juror, you don't say, well, this person is a Democrat or Republican, so I'm going to vote to convict them or not on that basis. You know, you realize that you have a greater duty, and that has worked to generate fair maps in states on the West Coast and elsewhere where they have established independent redistricting commissions. I am not in favor of using just pure computerized models. You know, people talk about that, but it in fact doesn't work because there are a number of sort of soft constraints on these things. You know, it's nice to follow existing county boundaries. It's nice to follow municipal boundaries when you're drawing district, but it's not essential. If you had a computer draw the maps, they could by accident draw 4 sitting members of the legislature into the same district. Is that fair or not? You know, should you even consider the residences of the incumbent members when you're drawing the map? So these are complex issues, but they can be treated fairly with a committee of citizens who have taken a pledge to do a fair job.
Thank you. Candidate Foster, what plan or plans do you support that will address the cost of higher education? Do you support proposals for free community college or additional general tuition support for colleges?
Yeah. One of the changes that's occurred in my lifetime, when I worked my way through college, you know, I got a very good education, courtesy the taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin, largely. And I think it was either $2,500 a semester or $2,500 a year, which I paid for by a summer job and an evening job. And that's not possible anymore. And as a result, young kids are coming out of college with just massive debts. And by the way, that was paid for, that very heavily subsidized education at the University of Wisconsin was paid for by top marginal tax rates on the very wealthy. And so that I understood when I was a 19-year-old starting my business with the education I'd received by those taxpayers, that if our company ever did well and was successful, that I would be paying very high top marginal tax rates. And I was very fine with that and did not object. You know, that did not keep me from staying up all night getting our first products shipped. And so I think that we have to have a realistic attitude on the fact that that very wealthy people their consumption is not affected by their top marginal tax rates. And there has been a concerted effort to really strip government of necessary funding for things like providing subsidized education. You know, because of frankly, people that are very well off and don't need the additional money. I don't think it's, you know, the wealthy people that I know, they're competitive on the basis of who gets their story listed as the high salaries of the CEOs. It doesn't affect how they live. They already have more money than they're going to spend in a rational lifetime. And so I think that we really have to understand the fact that there's a bargain that we used to have when I was young, that we will give young kids a real hand up getting there onto the economic ladder, and that it will be paid back by those whose ship on it.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, what are your plans to support and to address the cost of higher education?
Absolutely. I want to see happen the best thing that can possibly happen, and that is to get the government out of the lending business. When the government steps out of the lending business, it's going to put more burden on students to make more rational and practical decisions on the type of education path that they want to proceed on. Right now, to secure loans is very easy, courtesy of the government. They're borrowing money from the government, and this is the crisis that's ensuing, the quote-unquote crisis that's ensuing. What we want to do is to get the government out of this business and let students develop their own lending programs, work with schools directly, and work with private institutions, private loan companies, private banks. Let them develop their own kind of loan programs. When that happens, they're going to be far more choosy on what happens. In return, schools are going to be far more critical on the type of degrees that are going to be offered. And they're actually going to be offering degrees that are more relevant to the needs of society. That's really what we want to train people to do, and to thrive financially, to thrive intellectually. But they have to be realistic in their approaches. So if we get the government out of the loan business, people will be more realistic in the choices that they're making. This is just another aspect of encouraging the free market. And in this case, it's the universities. They're still free to offer any programs that they want, but really what they're doing is they're using the taxpayers to fund them. So we want to get the government out of this program and let the schools, universities work directly with the students.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, what is your stand on getting more coronavirus aid to local and state governments?
I'm sorry, would you say that again? The corona.
Sure. What is your stand on getting more coronavirus aid to local and state governments?
The best aid that we can give is to any kind of business, and that is immediate, is to get rid of regulations and lower taxes and help businesses to thrive. I don't have a sense on the type of financial needs that are pressing. Largely, it seems to me that we're still kind of in repair mode. We know far more than what we did in March. In March, we had very little idea of what was happening, and we needed to lock down. That put a lot of financial strain on institutions, put a lot of financial strain on the governments, the independent governments, state governments, and I understand all that. But we know far more now than we did before. It would seem to me the best path then is to do whatever we can to help businesses thrive. They can do so as safely as they want, but we want to encourage states to encourage businesses to move forward and just to embrace the type of technologies that are already available, to include some of the treatments that are available. We keep talking about hydroxychloroquine as if it's something that it's, no, we don't want to talk about that. But these are the kinds of things that may prove to be useful to some people. So we want to embrace any kind of medication, any kind of treatment, anything that might be working in this area. We want to encourage that for all of the states to be employing.
Thank you. Candidate Foster.
This virus was known to be deadly and transmitted in an aerosol manner by the people who briefed President Trump in late January. The virus has not changed since then. It is equally deadly. This crisis is not going to pass quickly, and in no amount of happy talk is going to make it go away. So I do favor the continuation of economic support, both to individuals and to businesses. Restaurants are not going to magically reopen and have customers because all regulations and all legal liabilities have been removed from them. They will, as a businessman, I know that the real job creators in our economy are customers. And customers will not come to restaurants when they don't feel safe. They will not feel safe when they see the people around them getting sick and many of them unfortunately dying from this virus. What we have learned in terms of what works are things like universal masking, things like maintaining social distance, absolute minimization of people leaving homes. This is very painful. It cuts against some of our strongest instincts as a species. On the other hand, with competent leadership that explains the correct science to its citizens, we've seen many advanced countries get very good results. If we had the same type of leadership as, say, New Zealand or Germany or even Canada, we would have tens of thousands and probably hundreds of thousands fewer people dead in the United States today. And so we have to tell people the reality of this, that it's only going to, it's going to go away when we get a vaccine that works well, and therapeutics. And the gold standard there is not hucksterism and wishful thinking. It is placebo-controlled, scientifically based clinical trials.
Thank you. To that end, Candidate Foster, would you take a COVID-19 vaccine if it had not fully completed phase 3 studies?
It depends on the nature of the data. There are two issues. There's safety and there's efficacy. It is possible with, because they have 30,000 people, they're trying to recruit most of those 30,000 people in the clinical trials for vaccines in areas with high levels of community spread. So that you may, in the placebo arm of this, get very rapidly the 100 or few hundred people that you need who have naturally been infected with COVID. And then you can look in the vaccine arm and see what the rate of, and then you run the statistics. It's fairly straightforward. And then it's quite possible with the clinical trial partly completed that you will know. This happens very often, for example, in cancer drugs, where they get halfway through a clinical trial and say, my gosh, it's working. It is immoral not to just give it to everyone. That is a scientifically possible result for the ongoing clinical trials. But as a scientist, I don't, I acknowledge that it's scientifically possible, but I'm not going to turn that into a promise by any date certain. The other issue is the safety. And the big issue there is that normally vaccines have taken many years so that you have to get approval, so that you have many years of experience on at least some patients. We will not have that. So that we will have to take a calculated risk with this. When we say, okay, the vaccine is approved, despite that there isn't one person on earth who's had the vaccine in their bloodstream for more than, some number of months. And so this will be a calculated risk. We must explain that science to the citizens. And one of the most tragic things about Trump's repeated happy talk and disregard of the science is that if he attempts to explain the science, no one on the left or the right will trust that.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, would you take a COVID-19 vaccine if it had not fully completed phase 3 studies?
I would not, and I would discourage it.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, do you think that the LGBTQ community has adequate protections under law and legal precedents? Is more required?
Yes, they have adequate protection. It's the same protection that anyone has. As far as legal protections, they have adequate protections, yes.
Thank you. Candidate Foster?
Well, unfortunately, the LGBT community has routinely been the subject of hate crimes in our society. I won't go through the list, but I think that communities, like African Americans and others that have been routinely targeted for hate crimes, unfortunately need special protection. And there's also been erratic nature in our willing to enforce those laws against certain groups, of which unfortunately LGBTQ people are included. So I think there is an ongoing need for strengthening and providing a federal backstop when you see injustices perpetrated at the local level, in the same way that we use when there are racial injustices that in criminal sentencing, that the federal government steps in.
Thank you. We're now at our closing statements. So we'll start in alpha order again, and Candidate Foster, you'll go first.
Well, thank you everyone for attending, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and for supporting our democracy for all these 100 years. As you've heard, I've been standing up to the Trump administration's hateful rhetoric and harmful policies ever since he took office. I have a record of taking tough votes and supporting fact-based policies and making progress to improve the lives of all Americans. Like when I proudly voted for the Affordable Care Act, knowing that that would put my reelection at risk. And that's why I'm going to keep fighting the historically corrupt Trump administration's continued attempts to downplay the effects of COVID-19, their attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, to defund the EPA and to gut environmental protections, to undercut our justice system, and to damage the future of our country. Protecting and defending the ACA, policing and criminal justice reform, election and campaign finance reform, universal background checks, a nationwide $15 minimum wage, and fighting back against climate change and doing the necessary research to really triumph are just a few of the areas that we've succeeded in passing major legislation through the House to help working families protect our democracy. And unfortunately, the Senate has not acted on most all of these priorities. And so as a result, we anxiously await better leadership in the Senate and frankly, a better president to move forward on these. We must find a safe and effective vaccine for COVID-19, and the evaluation of that vaccine must be based on scientific principles and not wishful thinking or political corruption of the process. So I hope that I have earned your vote to continue fighting for the citizens of the 11th District with a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Laib, your closing statement.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone watching. Thank you for everyone watching this. I'm grateful to the League of Women Voters for setting this time up and putting this time together. I'm grateful for Congressman Foster for being a part of it and having this exchange tonight. I run as a pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-free market candidate because I think that is the best representation of a platform for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Congressman has listed several suggestions tonight, several ideas that would help America, but many of them come at a higher price tag for Americans. And these glossed past ideas that can be resolved just by Americans doing what they do best, and that's innovate, and that's come up with their own solutions. And that's what I want free people to do. I want to free people to develop, to innovate on their own, to live freely, and to move in a government that's limited. I think that is the best effective and most efficient government can be is one that focuses strictly on just providing for true freedom and restraining evil. That's what I want to do, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Our time is up for this forum. For further election information, please consult the League of Women Voters US vote411.org online voter guide and the Illinois Voter Guide.org, which is powered by the League of Women Voters of Illinois. Both are 100% nonpartisan election information you need. A link to this recording will be located on each of the sponsoring League of Women Voters websites. Go to your local area league website for more information. We appreciate your participation, whether you are a candidate or a voter. It is essential to preserving our freedom and our country. Please remember to vote, whether it is via vote by mail, early voting, or on election day. Thank you.